The astute among you may have noticed I'm using a different crappy laptop than the crappy laptop I had before. This one is, well, I've had it for a while. A former roommate gave it to me, and it is, in some ways, slightly less shitty than the previous one I was using. That one is slow and difficult to deal with. This one is easier to deal with. It's 10 times faster, but it's got a cracked screen and 3 of the keys on the keyboard don't work, so I can't really use it as a computer unless I get a keyboard, but it works well for this. I can read off of the script while the camera's running. All that matters. On to the video. As I was running down rabbit holes on YouTube recently, I came across a couple of ideas that would be very useful for TTRPG world building. That being how gods happen, as well as what they really are. What I'm combining here are concepts from Neil Gaiman's American Gods and the idea of local godlings from the game Legends in the Mist. So, little gods, small gods. But the end result is something completely its own. First, we have to we got to define our terms. We got to determine what a god is, in general TTRPG terms, as well as D&D 5e specifically. The best definition I could come up with is a god is a personification of a concept. Whether that concept is an ideology, an object, a location, a philosophy, there can be a god of the concept of balance. There can be a god of nature in general, or that one river specifically. There could be a god of all the mountains or a god of just that one mountain. It's just that concept, that idea, personified in some way. Gods are also incredibly powerful magical beings who grow in strength based on the faith mortals have in their existence. So the idea is if a concept, place, ideology, philosophy, or object, etc., happens to be somehow connected to or in contact with strong magical energy, a repository of some kind, and happens to be personified by an individual or group of mortals, right place, right time, a really rare thing to happen, but it can and does happen from time to time. A godling might come into existence, comes into being, not very strong yet, but at least aware of itself and possibly able to interact with and manipulate the concept it was born out of. If, over time, enough mortals accept and acknowledge its existence, believing it to be real, then it becomes more powerful within its given domain or concept, becoming a full-fledged god, like capital G. You gotta remember there's already a lot of gods out there. Big ones, whose domain might partly overlap or completely subsume our brand new tiny godling. That's fine. As the godling grows in power, it'll find itself integrating with and becoming an aspect of the bigger god whose domain it grew into, depending more than anything else on which version or aspect more people believe in. So now we're doing ecology and the ecology of divinity as compared to horizontal gene transfer in single-celled organisms. Right. It sounds weird, but that idea of it actually works. So what happens if there's a brand new concept that's never been a part of any god's domain before? Something that is just so ubiquitous that none of the existing gods had ever been personified out of it. So where do we find one of those? After some digging, as far as I've been able to find, 5e doesn't have a god specifically of loyalty. It doesn't exist in any of the god's domains. A god of oaths, of keeping your word, of keeping your promises. A god who warns people against promising things they can't fulfill. A god who makes oaths binding magically and rewards those who are loyal and punishes those who break their word or break promises or break oaths. We don't have one of those. Okay. So how about we come up with a historic figure famous for always keeping their word and keeping their oath, even to their own detriment, even risking their death to keep their promises. No matter how small the matter might be, this is what's remembered about them. Their word is sacred to them. That figure becomes a local legend, remembered and revered as an object lesson and something for the young to aspire to as they grow up. Now, if this historic figure's burial place, or their homeland, or the place where they are most actively remembered, happens to somehow be magically attuned, like there's a deep reservoir of magical energy in the area for some reason. Ley lines or some bullshit, we can call it that. The memory or legend of this person might manifest as a new god, with no competing, more powerful god overshadowing their domain. From here, now able to manifest and influence their surroundings to some degree, they might start to gain a following. Faith. Clerics. Hand out a couple of visible manifestations, a few memorable miracles, and in short order, they're a full-on proper god all of a sudden. So now in our world building, my little land of Texta, or any world any of you are working on, we have a rough idea of how to build a pantheon of gods and how they would interact with each other. Okay, so remember that thing about mortals having faith in gods and believing they're real? Gods like to be remembered. Religions are pretty big on the whole idea of writing things down and reading them back to people on a regular basis, often on a weekly basis, to make sure everybody remembers all about the particular god they worship. Considering gods get more powerful as more people believe in them, imagine the opposite. What happens when everybody forgets about one particular god or another? Would their personification be absorbed into a newer, up-and-coming god with an overlapping domain? Would their domain be left behind or forgotten about among the divinity? Would that old god die? Or would they sleep until, if or when, somebody remembered them? Maybe some adventurer finds an ancient ruined temple and manages to read some piece of scripture or prayer carved into the stone wall. Would that be enough for that god to wake up? What sort of mood do you think a forgotten god might be in at that point? What kind of personalities do you think various gods might have? And when a forgotten god wakes up, what do they remember about themselves? Remember, gods are built on memory, on belief, on faith, on people knowing they exist. That makes them exist. The only thing anyone knows about them in this moment is their name and maybe 2 or 3 lines of text. Does the god remember more than that about themselves? Or do they have to wait until the mortal finds more of their scripture and reads it? If a God is powered by faith and memory, I'd imagine their own memory would be tied to the mortal memory of them. A forgotten God, when they get to the point where they realize this about themselves, might be a little desperate to make sure somebody remembers them. They might not really be right in the head for a little while, not knowing anything about themselves other than what a mortal can manage to discover. It'd be a scary situation for all involved at that point. Well, there's a campaign idea for you. Anyway, this is a decent amount of existential dread for one day. So like, share, comment, and subscribe, and I'll talk to you next time.